Hi people! The OGs will remember one of my first, if not my first video essays was about Squid Game's first season and how it was this perfect allegory for capitalism. It was this fantastic package of messaging that checked off every box it needed to. The main character, Gi Hyun's mom, is suffering from diabetes, but honestly it's not really the diabetes that necessarily kills her, but the corporate run healthcare system. The games are run by this old wealthy man who wants to profit off of poor people's desperation. He invites international VIPs that sit and watch and bet on their demise. And I even talked about in that video how the main characters and even some of the side characters represent archetypes that help add or tie together this overall metaphor for capitalism. Every inch of it illustrated that capitalism is not about meritocracy, but control. I definitely made that video on like the heels of me coming to this assured realization that I don't think this capitalism stuff is like that great. That was a conclusion I came to on my own just by my pure experience alone. I was already disappointed or had some ounce of disdain, if I'm being honest, towards my country and its attitudes towards uplifting white supremacy, you know. But then I now had this new layer of disappointment. And watching media like Squid Game and also another Korean film, Parasite, only further put the nail in that coffin. I had already forewarned in the intro of that video that Netflix teasing a season 2 was a little worrisome, and my point was only proven with time. What Netflix has done since the original release 4 years ago is just absolutely disgusting. They made the show where people die and murder each other into a real life reality TV show. They bring on real people who are also desperately in need of money to reenact a situation I'm not sure why anyone would want to voluntarily sign up for. This was something I could have never foreseen. I knew a season 2 would prove Netflix didn't understand the assignment at all, but this took the cake. They utilized the success of this property to recreate the game in the show that the main character is desperately trying to stop because it's so horrifyingly brutal and exploitative. Like, how dumb do you have to be? That was just freaking insane, but nobody seemed to care except for me because we're all docile and desensitized to this shit. Then they of course produced the second season, which was chock full of bad writing, especially plot-wise, completely threw away all of the symbolism that made the first one so special, and successfully ruined the legacy of the show. This is what we will explore today, rehashing the points I presented in the original video essay and crafting new ones to mourn the loss of this great piece of artwork ruined by Netflix. But before we do any of that, as always, it is your contractual obligation to subscribe before you proceed to the rest of the video. You like literally are physically unable to go forward unless you click that button. I'm sorry to tell you this, but you have to do it. You also have to follow me on TikTok and Instagram and what else do I have? You don't have to do the Patreon, but if you want to support, you can. I also have Discord. Get on the Discord, get on that right now. On Patreon, you can see exclusive content of how I make videos just like this one before anyone else does. You get to see what I'm working on before anyone else. You get sneak peeks, you get outlines, you get scripts. Girl, you get it all. You get it all. Why wouldn't you? I don't know. You can also just do $1 if you want to support either there on Patreon or here on YouTube, where you get cute emotes where you can put them in the chat, express yourself, flex on the hoes. You already know. But like I said, I want to rehash what made the first season so special. What did it get right? In my OG video, I broke it down to 3 main sections. Oh Il Nam, who is the creator of the games, white supremacy's role, and the archetypes. I'll only summarize my statements here to refresh your memory on the first season and provide context. If you want to hear my original points from that original video essay, I suggest you watch it, girl. It's one of my first video essays, so it might be a little rough, but I'm sure it does the job. It got me here, so it ain't for all I know. For all I care. Player 1, or O Ilnam, is a wealthy financial tycoon who created the games to profit off of others and prove his ultimate point that humans are worthless. We are introduced to him whenever he plays in the games with our main character Gi-hyun to relive his childhood memories before he dies. He ends up befriending Gi-hyun and ultimately dying at his hands during one of the games, except he didn't die, that was all a lie. One of the final scenes, when Gi-hyun goes to visit Ilnam, we get a glimpse into why he created such an awful game. They play one final game before his death in which they count down until midnight to see if someone will help a homeless man. Despite Ilnam being proven wrong right before his death, this illustrates how he views the world. Most people passing by this homeless man on the street is a justification for this game. It's a metaphor for how the world as a whole runs. Weak men get dominated by those in power, and weak men deserve to be left to die. It's that simple. Whether that's systematic in the case of this homeless man, or by direct violence. We see a different side of Ilnam, who we originally thought was like this cute, cuddly old man, who in reality is a vicious, apathetic demon who merely sees those below him as pawns. Now that I know more about the world than I did in 2021, it's freaking crazy that 2021, like that video that I made on Squid Game, will be 4 years old this year. That's freaking insane. That's crazy. But now that I know more, I can back up how Ilnam represents all capitalists, or the entire system, with examples. Now, just for a basic definition so we are all on the same page, capitalism is the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. At face value, it's just an economic system, but when applied to actual society, privatization often leads to systematic violence. In other words, the powerful few dominate and control institutions that many often need to survive, instead of that process being owned by the people, which would be communism or socialism. There are so many examples in which capital owners have proven to have this same mindset as Ilnam. Like, there's honestly too many to include in this video. I could point to the Industrial Revolution, the rise of monopoly owners like J.D. Rockefeller and Carnegie, whose reign led to unfair prices and unregulated exploitive working conditions that put men, women, and children in dangerous situations, sometimes leading to their death or serious injuries. They were also some of the first union busters who employed the police to beat up protesters who just, didn't want to get their arms chopped off. Something that is continued to this day by the likes of Jeff Bezos. I even know that there was that phone call with like Trump and Elon where they were bragging about union busting. It's still very much a thing. Or I could point to more recent examples like pharmaceutical companies having free reign in America to jack up prices on necessary drugs after paying off politicians. In other countries, drugs like insulin and even inhalers, which you can imagine, people need to survive, are infinitely more affordable. They also have the establishment of universal healthcare systems that allow anyone to get the care they need, sometimes along with private healthcare systems as well. But honestly, in my opinion, the presence of privatization often can just loop back to the system, the entire system being privatized, like in America. And we're seeing that in Europe right now, and I literally made a video about it using Drum Island if you want to learn more about all of that. Now we have, none of those things that at least Europe is holding on to at this very moment in America, because as I said, politicians are paid off by lobbyists to keep these systems running and to keep extracting money from your demise. Like I said, there's way too many examples that illustrate Ilnam's behavior, his attitude towards humans. But you can already start to see it. He as a character perfectly embodies the attitude of real-life capitalists who exploit others to get their individual gains. I've covered a lot of examples of how capitalism has destroyed a nation like America, so honestly, just pick a video. 9 times out of 10, I'm probably talking about capitalism in some way. Elon Musk Donald Trump, Bezos, Zuckerberg, so many modern examples of these demons we are told to look up to without any regard for the unethical ways in which they achieved their astronomical wealth. Meritocracy, once again, is a complete myth. The only thing I see is inequality. Now, I also, like I said, covered white supremacy, which I think is a little bit of a surprising connection, probably for most of you if you watch Squid Game, but I started to see how this was shown in the show in 3 major ways, and also how it links back to Korea in itself, which is economically, mentally, and sexually. Economically is shown through the VIPs, who all but one are white, which, as I said in my original video, as a fellow artist, I know this choice was deliberate. Hwang Dong-hyuk could have continued to hire Korean actors to play these roles, but he intentionally chose to seek out white people and one black guy, I think. White people really don't like when I talk about racism. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but like, this is gonna upset you if you're really fragile about this. Historically, whether due colonization or Western hegemony, white supremacy has been disseminated worldwide. Okay, don't get mad at me, get mad at like the American Empire or those random dudes on the boats in the 1500s, okay? It would be ahistorical if I said otherwise. In regards to capitalism, because of the events that happened during and after slavery, white people naturally already had more money. Their access to higher education, better job opportunities, better housing. Girl, I could keep going. That's why we have things today like the, racial wealth gap in between white people and black people. That's where you see it most prominently, right? I mean, you could compare it to other races as well. Which means it's easier for them to be in a position of power class-wise, like being a billionaire. Not only does the system, particularly in America, benefit the wealthy, but it also is set up to benefit people within the in-group, which the in-group in America is white people. White supremacy and capitalism, especially in the Western world, work in tandem. I talked about this in Sabati as well, my Sabati video. Formation of slavery was kind of just a precursor to the capitalist system that we have now. It was just that people, instead of assets and money, were the capital, which is quite grim, but it was what happened. It was the same exact system, which I detailed in that video. Stuff I didn't even know. They were like literal assets to be traded back and forth. It's crazy. So once again, they work in tandem. It makes sense why Hwang would create this group of characters who come from the Western world, because everyone worldwide has in some way, for the most part, been touched by Western colonization, especially Korea. This leads us to how the show also comments on mental and sexual dominance of white supremacy, more invisible ways in which we consume this ideology. One of the VIPs exhibits behaviors of fetishization towards the detective, something that Koreans have historically faced during subjugation of World War II and Japan's hold with the comfort woman, and also the essay that took place by American troops with comfort women during World War II and even the Korean War. And there's still a good chunk of fetishization today whenever it comes to just being Asian in general. It kind of intertwines with the mental domination that is seen subtly with the posters of white people in the hair salon, and this mental signal that whiteness equals beauty. Something that is definitely you can see in Korean beauty standards, preference for fair skin and hair, double eyelid surgery. There's this rejection of Korean beauty, which is traded out for Western beauty, or what is considered beautiful in the Western world. So do you see the hidden depth in this season? Okay, I'm not even done. We also have to talk about the archetypes, which each character helps to expand on the dynamics of this metaphor. The doctor, for example, is secretly working with the staff of the game, and in return escapes death until he ultimately meets his demise. It reminds me of this discussion we had around Blue Jam and the Marineford post-war video. This character that works with those in power and is willing to put the people beside him in danger, in the crosshairs for his own gain, but he's unaware that he's just as disposable as the rest of them. There's nothing special about the Doctor, there's nothing special about Blue Jam. Saebyok I thought was probably the most fascinating character, as she and her brother have escaped from North Korea, a communist country, but she is ultimately killed in this metaphor for capitalism. It's a stark statement that, to me, states even if you have these preconceived notions that communism is violent and will never work, capitalism is either just as or more violent. We could also get into a discussion about how North Korea really isn't technically, I wouldn't say it's a communist country by definition, but more of like a monarchy at this point. But that's a whole nother discussion. All of these details within the show illustrate the unjust system of capitalism that is sold to us as this morally just system, the most just system that there is on this planet. The game itself is sold on a lie, with the only info being revealed to the players is that if they win, they will be rid of their financial problems. It doesn't tell them that they'll die in the process or have to kill others to obtain that wealth. When we step away from the immersion of the show and reflect on our own circumstances, we are reminded of the hypocrisy we face every day. That we are climbing this impossible hill and told to step on our fellow humans to get a better life. Now, where was all of this depth, like I said, in season 2? Netflix completely dumbed down the narrative. Every part of the capitalism metaphor is missing for the most part. It becomes purely about the storyline to stop the games. There's no mention of Gi-hyun's mom or his daughter who is going to visit in America, which is so strange. The VIPs are no longer shown. It's like these people never existed in the first place. The side characters lack as much depth. The only one that like kind of adds to this metaphor is the pregnant girl, I forget her name, who needs obviously the money to pay for childbirth and raising the child. But like none of the characters like Thanos really in any way add to the depth of the show. They're just kind of there to be there. I mean, there's like talks about cryptocurrency and stuff, but it's so much more shallow and it really doesn't add in any way to the show. But there were two things that worked for this season, okay? I can't lie. I'm gonna be honest with you with my takes, okay? So you could argue that the voting aspect of the game that was highlighted this season could be a commentary on the false notion of democracy under capitalism. I think that was a pretty good thing to include in this season. People, as I mentioned, would rather inflict violence on those closest to them to achieve wealth than to stop the games and save everyone. It's definitely a good allegory for how a lot of countries are going politically, as several nations in the world vote to uplift fascist leaders. Similar to Squid Game, it's out of this hopelessness to solve their financial issues, a desire to move away from the status quo to just do something different. So that was pretty decent. Okay, I'll give them that. And Gi-hyun, after they go down the voting route and that just like doesn't work, Gi-hyun recognizes that it'll only get him so far, and so he plans a violent revolution where they engage in a standoff with the guards. And democracy sometimes, as I pointed out in my last video, involves violence, as we know from the civil rights movement, the ANC, Palestinian emancipation, and even uprisings in Korean history like the Jeju massacre, in which the islanders protested for a unified Korea during South Korea's first election and were violently suppressed for doing so. So adding this layer, both of those layers, is a pretty good analysis of what evolves under the corrupt suppression that devolves under capitalism. If politicians are being paid off by lobbyists and therefore only listening to the 1%, then your vote really only goes so far. And I feel like we're seeing that now more than ever as people are protesting and speaking out using their First Amendment right and really doesn't matter. You know, democracy, these rights that we're supposedly given are honestly slowly being ripped away from us as people who exhibited their First Amendment right are having their green cards revoked and being deported. But that is naturally how the system works, especially whenever you already had years and years of corrupt suppression. They really have only ever listened whenever they can find some loophole to benefit them. That's really how it's only ever worked. Democracy in itself isn't real. The detective who we see in the first season also has his own side story within the second, but it's so drawn out and poorly written that it leaves a little to be desired. He's on this mission to find out where the games are taking place, but the boatman who saved his life and has been helping him actually turns out to be a traitor. And there's this point within the show for like the last few episodes where we literally do not see him for 2 or 3 episodes. You just like completely forget, honestly, that it was ever happening. It was like, who paced this out? Who thought this was a good idea? Season ends on a cliffhanger, but there's really nothing that is left to be desired from it. It ends awkwardly right after Gi-hyun's uprising failed and his best friend is shot, but there's no hint at what could come next. Nothing really to look forward to as an audience member. All we feel is, well, I guess it's over. I guess, wrap it up. While there were aspects they got right in this second season, I think ultimately sometimes stories need to be left alone. The first season was satisfying. It fulfilled and touched on every possible avenue it needed to drive home its point. It explored so many different aspects of Korean society and how hyper-capitalism can destroy people's lives in several different ways. Reflected on Korea's past with referencing the aftermath of the Korean War through characters like Sae-byuk, and how America's little project isn't as perfect as people would like to hope. Making a second season was just pointless. It didn't add anything meaningful to the story really. It disregarded and threw out main elements from the previous season as if they had never even happened. The plot was poorly paced out. The characters lacked as much depth. Even if I can admit that there were a few things that they got right that do add to the metaphor, it was ultimately a cash grab by Netflix. Anyone who disagrees with that is just lying to themselves. The first season made nearly $1 billion for Netflix, and they want to milk the IP for everything it had. That is only further proven by their choice to put real people in a Squid Game simulation for content, how they chose to leave this second season on a cliffhanger so they can make a third. Netflix chose to continue this trend of running series into the ground to make more profit rather than just honoring the art. Ultimately, Squid Game's initial point about the harm of capitalism on everyday life ironically became the show's demise. Now, I would like to thank all of my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much. My $10, my $5, my $1. All of you get hugs. Group hug. Also like to thank my YouTube members. Thank you so much, and thank all of you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.